Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, and today on this Friday we'll be discussing Pluribus episode 3. We are well into this season. I'm loving it. From what I can tell, you are loving it. I think we learned a lot in this third episode, so let's dive right in to the episode called Grenade. Now, if you're new around here, please like and subscribe, comment below with your thoughts on the episode, and let's dive in. I don't know about anybody else, but while I was watching this episode and even while I was thinking about Pluribus this week, all I could think of was the hive mind being like an AI, being like ChatGPT. You know how whenever you're talking to ChatGPT, it always asks a follow-up question like, can I help you with this? Would you like that? This super uncanny valley level of helpfulness that the hive people, the we, the us, demonstrates towards Carol felt very much like AI. We open with a cold opening set 2,617 days before the incident. Now, when I first saw this timeline up there, I was worried that it was 7 years after the incident, which would have been a huge surprise. Instead of fast forwarding, we are backtracking, starting with a flashback to a vacation in Norway that Carol and Helen took together. The premise of where they are seems very interesting, fascinating, and luxurious. The fact that the entire hotel is built out of snow and ice and that it's only used in the winter, so that every stay there is quite unique, with only a handful of people being able to stay there during the season before the hotel is essentially torn down and made new again. This wasn't a direct parallel, but I did think about humanity in a way when we think of humankind, different extinction level events, even diseases that have wiped out vast and intelligent civilizations. It kind of made me think of this snow hotel. What happens when we do have to destroy everything and rebuild? Some argue that the ancient Mayas, etc., these really powerful civilizations, some of which vanished without a trace, may be a sign that they figured out too much, that they got too powerful for their own good. Now, one very striking aspect to this cold open is just how much of a Grinch Carol is. Unfortunately, as someone who hates being cold, I couldn't really fault her at first. I don't think I'd want to spend $100,000 going and staying in an igloo, sleeping on an ice bed. I don't think I would have complained in the same way, but I can't necessarily say that I would have been overjoyed at that premise. I don't blame her for wanting to spend all that money on a nice, luxurious vacation that they could have spent together. However, Carol completely lost me when she looked up at the Northern Lights, which has been on my bucket list for my entire life, and said it looked like a screensaver. So we not only get a good understanding of who she is, who she has always been, never satisfied, always complaining, her success is never good enough. Also see this beautiful dynamic that Carol and Helen had together. Helen seems to be curious and excited, passionate about life itself. And the one thing that really strikes me about Helen is that she isn't telling Carol to just shut up. At some point, you have to be an even more positive person to not allow somebody that negative to ruin your time. They really are the yin to each other's yang, Helen being a glass half full person and Carol being a glass half empty. Now, was Helen's life force kind of Carol's connection to life and to vitality, with the void that is now left in Carol's life after Helen has passed? Is there almost no happiness left for her? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Now, the one thing that really bothered me about this scene is that there was no breath, no cold breath coming out of them. I know that's not always the case, but I'm like, if they are truly this cold, why is there no breath? Did anyone else notice that? Anyway, we get hit with that intro again. I love the intro, all the pieces coming together, and of course the I in Pluribus being the one. And now, is this a hint that Carol will be the last one left? You guys tell me. I wonder if this whole series or even season 1 will be about her truly being the last one left on the planet, because she is so miserable. Even as the hive mind figures out how to turn more unaffected, perhaps Carol will be the last one to go, if she ever is. We're back on the plane. It's now been 3 days since the incident. Carol has indeed retrieved Joja, indicating that she has some sort of soft spot for her, quote, chaperone. Although the we do consent to Kumba's sexual advances, did Carol think that she was perhaps saving Joja, or is this proof that Carol really does want her around. Furthermore, was this part of Zhou's plan to kind of manipulate Carol into caring about her? Are they both using each other? Or was this a glitch in maybe the hive mind with Zhou showing some sort of preference with where she wanted to be and with whom? I just have to say it that Carol not being in first class really pisses me off. Her constant anger in this episode is very understandable, and while she is very unlikable, you can't help but feel sympathetic to her circumstance. But between her constant outbursts and calling up Zhou like an angry Karen trying to talk to customer service, we are meant to like her less and less. Which begs the question, is individuality itself a curse? Would she truly be better off if she could be part of the hive? Now, we learn some very interesting facts about the other unaffected, the ones who did not show up to the meeting because they can't really speak English. We have Boris, a 60-year-old candy vendor in Istanbul, Ida, 23-year-old woman from Indonesia who's a dancer, Sidor Melis in Sardinia who is 89, retired, Mary who lives in Lesotho and is 8 years old. I did not know where Lesotho was. I had to look it up. Abdul, 37, in Yemen, who sings the call to prayer. And then finally, the guy from Paraguay, Monoso, who has refused to connect with the us. While this represents a very eclectic group of people, none of these individuals have the background that Carol so desperately seeks, which is some sort of doctor, engineer, biologist, etc. I guess you can write all of that steamy, dark romance, but it will not save you in a zombie apocalypse. Carol really wants to get a hold of Monoso. He doesn't answer, then he answers and hangs up, then he answers and yells at her, and then she rattles back with pretty much the only Spanish that she knows, "Chinga tu madre, cabrón," and then hangs up the phone, has to go kind of sequester herself so she does not have another angry outburst. It's important that she knows what a precarious situation she's in. As these circumstances test her emotionally, she really has to hold back because so many lives are in jeopardy, and I think she was probably extra careful being on an airplane knowing that those two pilots could have crashed the plane. Now, one thing I did write down is I do think the world would be a better place if we had a hive mind for some professions such as pilots, doctors, etc. Like if you could access the hive mind of the best pilot in the world under a stressful circumstance or during an operation, I think we would all feel just a little bit safer. Comment below and let me know what other professions you would like to see added to the hive mind. Back in Albuquerque, Carol completely self-medicates with alcohol, which we know she's kind of had her problem with in the past, but also Xanax and reruns of The Golden Girls. This reminds me very much of when you are just so depressed you can't move and you just have to put your comfort show on. For me, it's Gossip Girl. Luckily, I did that as a 17-year-old going through heartbreak and not as a middle-aged woman dealing with the end of the human race. Comment below and let me know what your comfort show is. For much of this episode, we are dealing with a back and forth between Carol and Zhou, as Carol calls to complain and as Zhou / us, we, them, continue to try to cheer her up. Now, at first, they do this by delivering mail, including a gift from Helen that was in transit. They do this by delivering a favorite breakfast that was informed by Helen and their travel memories together. Instead of being any kind of comfort and solace to Carol, who is still very much in the grieving process, she feels very angry. She feels violated. She repeatedly asks the hive to stop using Helen's memories, not necessarily against her, but toward her. She refuses to eat the delicious breakfast prepared by the hive and instead opts for a handy-dandy run to Sprouts. Now, her walking into an empty Sprouts during the apocalypse was such a funny scene to me, and of course, she finds the grocery store completely empty. Now, when I first saw this, I thought that maybe the hive did this purposefully to keep the unaffected dependent on them for food, for sustenance, for support, but it also makes sense, just like the power outage, that they are trying to consolidate resources for them, for their plan. Then, as soon as she requests for her Sprouts to be restocked, people are coming out of the woodworks to bring food, to put everything back where it is so that she has access to Sprouts. I do love this show because it does a great transition between the unsettling, the sad, and the moments of levity. It really allows the viewer to kind of put themselves in the shoe of the person. Minus all the sadness and grief, this is like being in the pandemic times a million, where you just had to stay inside your house and be good with it, and some people hated that, and other people took up sourdough bread baking. And I was just thinking, if I could get over the sadness and I had an entire Sprouts at my disposal, because that shit's expensive, what kind of gourmet British baking show type of desserts I would try to whip up in my house. Let me know what your apocalypse activity of choice would be. And I love this as well, because when we talk about the power going off, again, they're consolidating resources, and there's no crime in the city. There's no problems to prevent. And this is like the most fascinating apocalypse I've ever seen, because it's the end of the world where you are simultaneously probably safer than you've ever been. You're not going to get hit by a car crossing the street. Someone's not going to come and rob you, chase you down. Once again, hats off to Vince Gilligan, who has managed just to create such a fascinating premise of this show. And I actually looked back into an interview with him, and it looks like this wasn't even his original premise, and he was originally going to have a male character. It was going to be slightly different. Maybe I'll talk about that in another video. Zsuzsa comes over and is invited in for a drink, which I'm like, of course, just get the hive mind drunk and see what happens. I know they're part of a collective mind, but just like Carol asked, does everyone get drunk? What kind of difference will we find in the hive mind when their inhibitions slip? We learn that it's not a matter of if, but a when they turn Carol. They're working around the clock. Remember, they have the best scientists, engineers, biologists, and resources in order to turn everyone unaffected. Carol kind of asks, you say my body is my own, my body, my choice, that there's autonomy, but that only goes until the moment that I'm not me and you can change me. Zsuzsa talks about it being a biological imperative, liking it to seeing somebody drowning in a lake and hesitating and debating, asking for consent to throw them a life preserver. You wouldn't think about it, you would just do it. This is clear that just the condition of being human, especially the condition of being the type of flavor of human that Carol is akin to suffering and drowning.
It's distilled from both potato and corn.
Zsuzsa yapping about the history of the alcohol is so funny to me. If Zsuzsa is the hive mind, just think about the questions you could ask. Again, it gets me thinking of what I would do in Carol's circumstance. And I would say I'm a little more cheerful than Carol by nature. So I'd be asking, like, what's the truth about Area 51? Tell me about these previous world leaders. What really happened with JFK? Let me know what you would ask if you had access to the hive mind. In the sort of climax of the episode, Carol finally starts asking, and more like telling than asking. Remember in the last episode, she was accused of not asking how it feels. Instead, she starts explaining how she bets it feels. She describes these blissful experiences, perhaps travel memories that her and Helen experienced together. She then ends in kind of setting up the Norway example, and Zsuzsa finishes her sentence about Norway. We have the context from this intimate experience, and once again, Carol feels robbed and violated by accessing Helen's memory. As she gets angrier, we find out that grenade, remember the grenade that she was given kind of offhandedly, she made a sarcastic comment about having a hand grenade. All of her problems could be fixed by a hand grenade. Zsuzsa thinking she was sarcastic, but not being completely sure and bringing her one anyway. Carol is convinced that this must be fake, that they wouldn't set her up with a real hand grenade. And unfortunately, it's real. And there's an explosion. Zsuzsa's quick thinking is able to probably save both of their lives. However, Zsuzsa gets quite injured, a concussion as well as blood from the shards of broken glass flying at her. Carol does go to the hospital, and I do think that slowly but surely she is starting to care about Zsuzsa more and more. Remember, Zsuzsa is literally supposed to be her dream girl, and while it seemed like she was softening towards her, it's an ebb and flow here with her and Zsuzsa. However, her going to the hospital, it seems like she's genuinely worried, and it's really starting to dawn on her like just how destructive she can be in her modus operandi. And we have a DHL employee of all people explaining the medical situation. Carol then goes down this epic thought experiment asking if they would give her a grenade again. From grenade she goes to bazooka, she goes to tank, yes, and then she eventually gets to an atomic weapon. It seems like the DHL guy, who this actor did fantastic by the way, is computing her requests in real time, as if he's asking the hive mind or there's a consensus, or I even wonder if there is disagreement within the hive mind. We learned something very new, which is that they can't say no to her, even if that would involve their own destruction. If she asks for an atom bomb, they can weigh the pros and cons, but ultimately, if she's in control of that, decides to bomb the city, that is her choice. We kind of end on this important realization. Now, as the audience, I think we understand this. Like, we know that they give them everything they want. We've seen this when everyone leaves and clears out of her cul-de-sac, when Kumba requests a Air Force One as a vehicle of transit. But maybe she still thought there were limits to what they could agree to. We see her mind kind of moving here, and we only know that she might try to push the buttons and the boundaries to either free herself or get something she wants. Maybe if they do find out how to turn her, if she simply asks them not to turn her, they won't. What do you guys think she's going to do with this information? That's a wrap on this episode. In terms of my final questions, I'm wondering if she'll next episode go to meet with the guy in Paraguay. It seems like a lot of the unaffected want to be with their family. Kumba wants to be king of the world. Perhaps this guy in Paraguay is equally curmudgeonly as Carol, and maybe they can team up together. Maybe they'll just scream at each other until they cause an even bigger spasm, disruption, and death. Will Carol continue to soften to Joja? I think we will. Will we see their connection maybe even overcome the structure of the hive mind? That's an interesting thing I'm going to be looking out for. Will she have another outburst? I think that's pretty much inevitable, and the consequences may be even more severe to her. And finally, does having unaffected live in give the hive mind purpose? What is their purpose once the process is truly complete? How will they live? We know we'll consolidate the resources. We know they will live in absolute silence and even darkness. They don't talk. But it seems like serving the unaffected and turning the unaffected is giving them a really big purpose. What's their purpose outside of that? Let me know what you thought of episode 3. It was definitely a shorter episode, a bit slower, but I think we're able to really learn more about Carol, ask some important questions, and test the limits of what she can do in trying to get her way out of this very intense problem. Again, thanks for watching. If you're new to my channel, please like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Special shout out to all of my Waffle Party VIP members. Thank you so much to Chris Bezeski, Jim Rodney, Matt Winbury, Bo Dierker, Dolores Abernathy, Daniel Ariano, and Marlon Yamzon. And thank you to all of my other paid Patreon members. I'll see you next time. Stay safe out there. Don't let any rats bite you. You never know what kind of virus those rats are carrying and how it can completely change the human race. So let's all stay safe. And you know what? Let's try to be a little more positive. Let's learn from Carol's curmudgeonly behavior and try to see the glass half full this week. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.